Welcome to Alabama Manufacturing Now, hosted by Alabama Technology Network, a podcast where we cover a wide array of challenges, solutions, and innovations for manufacturers. We're your host, Whitney Barlow, Supplier Development Manager. And I'm Paige Caulfield, Marketing and PR Manager.
Welcome back, everybody, to Alabama Manufacturing Now. My name is Joey Massey. I'll be guest hosting today along with Whitney and Paige. Today's guest is our friend Carrie Hines. She's the president and CEO of the ASMC, the American Small Manufacturers Coalition. Carrie, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
It is our pleasure. Believe me, it's our pleasure. So will you tell the folks a little bit about ASMC and how you work?
Sure. The ASMC is the American Small Manufacturers Coalition, which is a trade association of the NIST Manufacturing Extension Partnership Centers. We essentially are an organization that does advocacy, educating, and lobbying on Capitol Hill for the federal funding that MEP centers receive.
Wonderful. So in all the work you do in that capacity, what are some of the major challenges you see manufacturers face today, especially in a post-pandemic era?
I think the biggest challenge that manufacturers today is actually workforce, finding a skilled workforce. It is one of the biggest challenges across the country. As manufacturing is coming back, manufacturers are finding a really hard time finding that skilled workforce to fill the jobs that they have. I think another big challenge that they're also facing, which can help with the workforce challenges, is really implementing a digital transformation. And that's changing everything in their manufacturing business, from like the Industry 4.0 technologies, automation, robotics, adapting all of those things into their manufacturing facilities and processes. Those are some of the biggest challenges, especially small manufacturers face.
Sure. So we have been trying for the past couple of years to make a difference in the supply chain for organizations in Alabama. And we know that disruptions in supply chain have been an issue everywhere. I'm sure you've seen the same. How would you say that the Manufacturing Extension Partnership has helped or is helping to alleviate some of the supply chain issues we see? And what's on the horizon for that? How do you think that's gone, and how's it going to go?
Well, it's a great question. And I think we as a country really didn't pay attention too much to supply chains until we hit the national crisis of COVID. And so out of COVID, a benefit, if you could say that, of COVID was for the general citizenship to realize the importance of manufacturing and the things that they use every day. They only realized this when they didn't have it. And I also think it helped manufacturers realize that they need to not just focus on their immediate customers, but customers that also supply them in their supplies, but those that are down the pipeline of the supply chain. So MEP has really kind of helped manufacturers take a look at that whole supply chain. It really starts with a mapping of where they fit in a supply chain. Where are they getting their products from? Where are they getting their inputs from? Where are they actually pushing them out to? So that's kind of the first part. They're looking at that map. Where do I fit in? Am I overly reliant on one or another? So that kind of leads to the next part. When they see that map of where they fit, it shows them where are the risks, right? I'm getting all of my input, all of my raw materials, this one part from one supplier. So MEP centers help them kind of get in there, identify other suppliers, other areas, look at a risk of their current suppliers and see, hey, they're in a hurricane zone, for example, and do I need to start to look elsewhere for another one just in case? So they really help with that risk mitigation in the supply chain. And, they help also when they are a supplier to a larger OEM, for example. And MEP centers go in and help manufacturers to obtain certifications that they may need to, provide those supplies to their OEM, to their customer. But it also helps them identify other potential customers. If they get certifications, then that allows them to be a supplier to another customer. So MEP really helps from soup to nuts, supply chain mapping, resilience, optimization, and getting in there and helping those manufacturers become more resilient in their supply chains.
Yeah, that's great. I completely agree. You mentioned digital transformation earlier, and I think that is also important, but that's not the only piece to that puzzle. There are new technologies aside from digital transformations, AI, the like, the whole nine yards. And I know you've worked with MEP, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, in a large capacity. How do you think the MEP is assisting or helping to assist companies to adopt the new technologies, the digital transformations, the Industry 4.0s? What's the mechanism for that? How is that working?
It works differently all across the country. But first of all, you have to start with the manufacturer and doing an assessment of their processes. And where can digital transformation help them become more efficient? So that's kind of the first thing. Once they look at that process, they can kind of do the assessment and say, hey, we could improve areas of productivity here, there, and so forth. One of the biggest challenges, especially small manufacturers, is really identifying, well, what are those technologies and how could I implement them, and making sure that they work, right? So you don't necessarily want to spend a lot of money implementing a technology that you don't know is going to work. So there's a couple of ways that MEP centers do this across the country. They have traveling technology demonstrations. So they can actually bring a truck, a technology demo lab to manufacturers in 2 different areas that have different technology set up in them, cobots, robots, things like that. So they can see it for themselves, get their hands on it, see if it's actually going to work in their facility. Also, many centers actually have that technology demonstration lab in their own facilities. So they bring manufacturers in to see those technologies and whether or not they think they can be applicable to their business. So they really help them look at them, right? What are the technologies? Will this work for me? And then the real work comes when they decide, I think that'll work. Let me put it into play. And they actually help a manufacturer adapt the technology. And that's not just putting something on the floor like a cobot. That's a big investment. They have to adapt to a process. They also have to adjust a workforce, right, to using that new technology. So it's not just the piece of technology, whether it's automating a process, bringing in a cobot, but it's also expanding it to the workforce. So there's multiple steps to it. And the MEP centers really help manufacturers break that down into somewhat baby steps.
I agree with that. I've thought, there is the supplier scouting system that MEP uses. And I believe there are MEP centers who use they don't use a technology scouting service. They supply a technology scouting service. There are situations where a company needs a certain technology and no one there knows that if that technology even exists. So not only, to your point, is it a capital investment, you have to invest the time to even discover that the technology is available. And I believe there are MEP centers that host such a service. I've always thought that it would be great if, along with supplier scouting, there was an official national network technology scouting situation, but I don't know how that would work. That would be years in advance, but that's just a thing I've thought about.
Yeah.
Joey and his deep thoughts.
Yeah. Don't get me started.
That's why you're here with us today, for those deep thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, it's a complex problem. I mean, we try to sum it up as succinctly as we can, but it's a complex situation when you look at it on such a scale.
Carrie, I'm going to kind of change directions a little bit and talk about cybersecurity. It's become a really big concern lately for manufacturers. What do you do? What is your role in helping small businesses protect their operations?
So again, it goes back to learning and assessment, right? So MEP centers, one of the biggest challenges with cybersecurity in small manufacturers is they think it's not going to happen to me. I don't need it. They only target big companies. My clients don't need these certifications. So one of the biggest problems about cybersecurity to a small manufacturer is getting them to learn about it, right? One of the issues there is you try to show examples of other companies that have had a cybersecurity attack or they've been vulnerable. It's one of those embarrassing things manufacturers don't want to talk about. So the ones that have been hit with the cybersecurity breach of some sort, they are embarrassed that they let that vulnerability out there and they don't want to talk about it. So helping small manufacturers understand that actually, if you have any type of digital process, any data in your processes, you are subject essentially to a cyber attack. So forming them with knowledge. And then MEP centers get in there and do assessments of where do they stand? Where are those vulnerabilities? And helping them understand where they can improve. They also help with kind of compliance issues. So if they have, again, a customer that's requiring cybersecurity standard, they can help a manufacturer understand where they are and what they need to do to complete the compliance and getting certification. They actually don't provide the certification themselves, but they help them get their processes in place to get that certification. In addition, we also can connect them with third-party providers that can provide different cybersecurity services or provide the actual, software that they need and so on and so forth. But really, they get in soup to nuts, help them understand the importance of it, why they need to do it, an assessment of it, and then how they can fix those vulnerabilities.
You talked earlier about workforce shortages, and that seems to be a very common challenge these days. How do you support manufacturers in finding those skilled workers?
So we have some really interesting programs across the MEP centers across the national network of finding it and hopefully training skilled workers, right? First, you've got to assess the needs of where do we need, what skills are needed. And again, as we go to that digital kind of transformation, there are a lot more advanced type of skills that we need than some of the basic. So identifying the range of skills that are needed to fill these positions is one. And then we work a lot with our local workforce boards and community colleges for longer term training. But really, some of the really interesting things that I like to highlight when we talk workforce about the programs across the country is really hitting those untapped resources. And those things are really going out into maybe second chance type of hiring, which is going into, many centers across the country tap into their prison systems and go and train the incarcerated individuals into manufacturing skills. And so when they come out, they have meaningful employment that has a really great salary. So I was talking to a center the other day, they actually said, I've never seen, but it's happened in their state, where someone was about to get released that delayed their release to complete the manufacturing training so that they could have a job when they get out of prison. And that's amazing. So that's really solving two issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is helping recidivism and then also meeting the workforce needs. Along those same lines, one of the other kind of finding workers is tapping into some people with special needs. There's a lot of interesting programs out there that are putting some individuals with special needs into jobs where, the more traditional manufacturing jobs, where they can do that repetitive work, but that make a good salary and help them contribute to society. Also, apprenticeships are really big, and those are a lot more specific to a manufacturer about what a manufacturer needs. But MEP centers can help manufacturers find apprenticeships, put them into play, and so that they can get that meaningful employment that's really the skills of the workers that manufacturer needs.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I've never heard of anybody, though, delaying getting out of prison just so they could complete a program so they would have a job lined up. That's fascinating. So what initiatives are in place to engage younger generations to develop the future workforce for manufacturing?
So again, many, many different programs across the country, but some of the ones that I like to highlight are the ones that engage the K through 12, right? The youth is in many different ways. Manufacturing, we just finished yesterday, Manufacturing Day and Month. We extend it into the month. But there's lots of programs across the country where different centers do different things, mainly which get younger individuals out into manufacturers themselves. So they can show them it's not the old, dirty, dark jobs of the past, right? That they're actually advanced skills and get them out into a manufacturer and show them what manufacturers are. Very similarly, there's other programs across the country. There's one that's called What's So Cool About Manufacturing. It's actually a video contest for high schoolers that they actually have to go find a manufacturer and make a video about what's so cool about that manufacturer.
Neat.
And in that process, they're finding out themselves, manufacturing is in fact cool. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty interesting too. One other program that I really love is what's called Student-Run Manufacturing Enterprises. And there are some programs across the country which actually have a manufacturing enterprise in the high school or in their community career technology center and they manufacture a product. So the high school students are actually learning from soup to nuts, from design to sales to marketing to manufacturing an actual product in the basement of their high school as part of their curriculum. So it's getting them involved in manufacturing. And in this particular program, many of those students go on after high school to continue either four-year degrees or going right into the manufacturer to do, to continue on that path that they otherwise would not have because they wouldn't have known about it. So those are some just really cool things that we're doing across the country to hit kind of K through 12 age, of making them understand that manufacturing is really a well-paying job that they should get into after high school.
Yeah. And it's
That's
not
great.
always dark and doomy.
It's can be a lot of fun and cool and all the other words.
That's right.
Well, I think it's great because, people use all these products, but they don't necessarily think about what it takes to actually produce one.
Correct.
Right.
And if you have to produce something when you're in school, you will learn that there is some step. It doesn't just appear.
Right.
Right. We have a company in Florence, Alabama, which is North Alabama, Carrie. Southwire is the name of the company. They're actually a Canadian-based company, and they have high schoolers come in and work, and it's picture hanging wire that you buy at Lowe's is what the kids are, the students are doing. And it is a transformative program. They actually recruit, they call it the upside down pyramid. So they go and identify kids and students that potentially have some kind of barrier that would prevent them from excelling in high school. And those are the ones that they go and try to interview into almost an internship program. They're paid off their attendance, they're paid off the grades they make. And they said one of the best things about it is when they walk into a Lowe's and can find the wire and say, oh, I made that.
I made it.
Look
and
what
I can do.
That's what's really cool about manufacturing.
Yeah, that's great.
With talking about the youth, it makes me think about sustainability and sustaining not just our workforce, but everything else that we talk about when it comes to sustainability. And it's definitely becoming an increasing priority in manufacturers. How are you seeing that throughout the country where centers are working with small and medium or even large manufacturers with sustainability?
Yeah, they're definitely working to kind of adopt sustainable practices. And that can be anything from changing their carbon footprint, right? Looking at their energy consumption. Is there different ways that we can serve energy, different energy? So one of the good things that MEP centers do is they'll go in and do energy assessments to look at how are you using it? Where are there opportunities to improve? And is there something that we can do to kind of reduce that carbon footprint? So that's one of the biggest things that we do. We also, in sustainability practices, you're also looking to limit or decrease or repurpose waste. And there's several manufacturers across the country too that look at what is their waste and can it be repurposed. There's, some of the really innovations of manufacturers. They look at, I create this much waste here, can I turn that over? And they've made partnerships with other manufacturers that have now taken that waste and made a product. I think many of you have heard about, the manufacture of like gymnasium floors out of, rubber waste, basically,
Right.
From shoes and things like that. So they're looking at their practices really to, again, reduce energy consumption. They're looking to reduce their waste and that overall carbon footprint. Also completing a lot of the ISO 9000 certifications too, is that part of that, I think, certification, that quality, sustainability, practices as well. So those kind of look at that as well to help their practices.
So that's really cool. Knowing I'm walking on a gymnasium floor that used to be tennis shoes, right? Or a dashboard of a car that used to be a 2-liter Coke bottle, or something like that. It's really interesting how you do those things and people see, you don't realize how much recycled products you're using every day because it has completely transformed. So we all know with COVID that manufacturers, as long as the rest of the world, had to learn about resilience and had to learn about preparing for unexpected changes. That was a pretty unexpected change. The world was moving, and then all of a sudden, within 1 week, the whole world was shut down, and then everything kind of slowly started coming depending on where you ranked. How have you seen centers and working with manufacturers to prepare for that if it happens again? I mean, what? couple weeks ago, I guess, late September. So about a month ago, we were looking at a strike at the ports. 2 devastating hurricanes went through the southeast, which also hit 2 of the major ports for the entire country. And so how do you see this happening with centers? Are they working with them in any capacity to help them prepare for these vulnerable times that we're in?
Yeah, I think it goes back again to supply chain and that risk mitigation, right? So looking at where are the sources of their inputs and find other sources, just in case. Looking at what is our risk there. So that diversification and supply and helping them prepare will help them become more resilient. So that's one of the biggest things that we can do. We've seen, and sadly, we don't get those phone calls, right, as MEP centers until there's a crisis, right? So we're trying to be proactive here and really starting to identify could there be problems to prevent it. But we've had some pretty amazing stories in crisis where we as a national network has stepped up and provided things. I think one of my favorite stories is when there was a hurricane in Florida, and it was a crisis situation where they needed ventilator parts. They were preparing these field hospitals and they needed ventilator parts and they couldn't find them. It was at the end of, COVID, things, supply chain was an issue. And they reached out to the MEP National Network and said, I need this ventilator part. Can somebody please help us find this? And within 6 hours, we identified a manufacturer in Massachusetts that had that ventilator part and was able to make a multi-million-dollar deal with that hospital system in Florida, got the products there within 24, 36 hours, I think, which is amazing. So, again, we want to prevent that. So we're trying to be more proactive and helping them, prepare for those risks. But it's nice to know that, if you don't see every risk and you have a problem, that there is this network to reach into to help you solve it immediately.
That's amazing.
I was with both of those, both centers in a meeting 2 weeks ago, management reps from both, and they were discussing it, and it was definitely less than 24 hours that they received the parts. They found them, struck the deal, received the parts in less than 24 hours.
Wow. Which is when we go out and talk to men. It is.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the best kept secrets probably of all MEP centers in the country is that our manufacturers, I know in Alabama, we have so many different workforce spokes that they don't realize that are very much an Alabama-based workforce development. And while ATN is an Alabama-based workforce development connected to the community colleges, we have this very unique part that makes us connected to the entire country. And so within one or couple of phone calls or a Teams chat or et cetera, we can be in touch with someone, at least one representative from the entire country, which is pretty strong in my opinion. So that's what gives the strengths in the centers a lot of value. So do you see, strategy-wise, we always are talking about being proactive. I guess we've talked about that. It seems like we talk about that on every podcast. But where do you think the centers are trying to do strategic priorities for the upcoming year and how to support and uplift small manufacturers, small to medium manufacturers, especially inshore with the supply chain, giving us depth in the supply chain? Where do you see that, strategically laying out?
I think, again, the focus, it's strategically, they have to focus really supply chain, workforce, and that digital transformation, right? But they really need to start looking, they always have to do the continuous improvement, right, as well. That's almost like ongoing because these things change all the time. I think one of the biggest changes strategically that manufacturers need to prepare for is that digital transformation and those technologies. They're changing so fast and all the time. So what we have to do strategically is stay ahead of it, look at what's coming down from the OEMs that maybe they're seeing or pushing, and because that's going to affect that long supply chain. So, strategically, that's what we focus on is keeping abreast of the changes in technology, which can help support workforce challenges and supply chain challenges as well, right? But it's always, again, trying to be proactive, one step ahead and looking at what those trends are. But again, focusing back on that workforce supply chain and digital transformation or the industry 4.0 technologies, that's really key to what the manufacturers, what MEP is focusing on to help make sure those manufacturers stay ahead of the curve.
That makes a lot of sense. Joey, do you have any with the, you work real closely with all the other MEP centers, so.
I think one of the challenges, I think one of the challenges, right, as Joey said, I'm kind of in a negative space. Some of the biggest challenges is those strategic initiatives, right? Supply chain, workforce, digital transformation. They take time to show impact, but they are critical to the base of a manufacturing facility. So it's really challenging. You have to do it, but are you going to see that necessary immediate return that like you would a cost savings? No, you're not. But if you don't do it, you will be left behind. So that's a challenge, right? To try to educate manufacturers and say, we can save you this money, but which is great, but you've got to invest that back into staying abreast of these things so you aren't left behind.
Yeah, it's a long game. It's a 5 to 10 year minimum game. 2 years worth of effort is not enough to get you the returns on the back end of that. You really have to be prepared to stretch that out over 5 to 10 years to really see the difference. And I think people struggle with that because we're in an immediate gratification world. We want to invest this, and that's that. You go pay money for a car, you get a brand new car. That's not the way this works. You have to wait to get the benefits of it long term.
I agree. And that makes it difficult to everyone involved, the stakeholders, the people as we've always joked in a couple of other podcasts, those individuals that aren't really on the floor working with manufacturers or working the facility day to day. It's hard to justify the things that are more theoretical and definitely are the long haul. Supply chain is definitely the long haul. Identifying all of that. And it is like playing poker because they hold their cards tight of who's involved with who.
Well, it is a long haul, but it's also constantly changing. It's also continuous, to her point. New companies start up that produce an item that may not have existed when you researched that the first time. So there are updates you have to do to that, or just like all of our work, where we try to keep up databases of companies and how many there are in each state. Those will go stale, and you just have to know if your alternate supplier for product A that you identified 5 years ago, you need to make sure they're still in business. You have to stay on top of that. It's a constant thing.
Constant.
Continuous, as Ronnie Kaiser would say. That's what continuous means all the time.
Oh, Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today. Do you have anything else? And if people want to reach out and determine, especially if they're listening to our podcast and they're not an Alabama-based manufacturer, do you have a way for them to reach you or contact MEP centers?
They're welcome to reach me, or I can put them into contact with their local MEP center. I will say if I don't know the answer, I will direct them to someone hopefully that will. So locally in their state. So I do want to thank you for having me. This has been wonderful. And I think what you're doing is fantastic because the more we can educate, the more people know. So appreciate that.
We really appreciate your time today, Carrie. We really do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye.